So it's been a while. I'm back. I'm not gonna explain where I've been, but basically it's just work. And two things that are audio related. I went to the NIAV show, the Northern International Audio and Visual Fest. That thing is amazing. Get to listen to a lot of things that I will probably never own in my life, which is like, speakers in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the second thing, while I was there, I overheard this guy having a convo with one of those sellers. He was basically talking to this guy in NNL, which is a company that's based in Malaysia, proud to be Malaysian, and also they make preamps, specifically analog to preamps. The guy was basically explaining how the circuitry works, what this works, what that works, and he was like, look man, I have been playing this shit for 10 years. I've been playing with sound system for 10 years, and I don't understand a single crap that all of y'all say. Just let me listen to it. If it sounds good, I will buy it. That is all. And once I heard that guy talked about it like this, he makes a very good point. The truth is, I don't really care about all those stuff. I just want things to sound nice. If that thing sounds nice, I love it. That's it. Simple as that. I don't care if that thing has a single DD. I don't care if that thing has like a 10 BA, 2 EST setup, anything like that. As long as it sounds nice, we good. That is all. Which at the same time segues very perfectly to this thing right here. I just want to talk about music in general because I love music, and at this point it just translates very, very nice, to what I'm doing right now in this video. So without further ado, this is gonna be the review on the TSMR X, which is the 10th anniversary edition IEM from Tansil. Before I begin, just want to say thank you to Carson for actually sending these my way so that I could have a chance with them. And basically, they had to talk about my unadulterated review on TSMR X. And just from this, I just want to say the TSMR X is definitely something that I have never ever heard before. I've never even heard before this brand, but this thing is quite interesting. And I think this sets the landscape for what 2024 is. Starting off with the box, you have a very, very bougie front. As you can see right here, it is embossed in gold. Not too crazy about the back part, just specs. And at the side, you have TSMR on both sides. But anyways, once you slip it up, you get greeted with the TSMR X headpieces, which we will have a few very nice B-rolls later on. Taking these out, you will also be greeted with two sets of ear tips underneath. You have one that's translucent white and you have one that's translucent black. And in my opinion, I tried both of these. They honestly sound the same sonically, and we'll talk about tip rolling later as well. They also give you a small cleaning brush and also a SIM card because the TSMR X has dip switches. Definitely you'll also get some paperwork and something to talk about the dip switches, as well as, last but not least, the case. And inside this case, which in my opinion, yeah, this is pleather, but I feel like it's still alright. Inside it has the stock cable, which in my opinion, I feel like it looks quite premium in the hands. It does feel quite rigid. It is a 2-core, but I feel like it's alright. Okay, moving on, the build quality. First of all, the cable. Again, I'd just like to preface this thing, in my opinion, it feels a little bit rigid, but it feels solid. That's what I would want to say. And talking about the IEMs in general, they are basically, of a resin shell type material. And this thing right here, you could just see, I'm not really sure if the camera can pick it up, but you could see that the faceplate is quite special. Other than having like a very smooth faceplate, it has these sort of wave accents on it, which is quite interesting to say the least. And beside here, you could probably see the dip switches. At the default config, it should be 020, but I set it to 003 because this thing sounds better in 003, which I'll talk about in a second. Fit, this thing in my opinion fits perfectly, although depending on the tip, due to the fact that this is a tube guided system, I personally don't like tube guided systems a lot because this thing doesn't really have that much proper venting, if it makes any sense. No matter what kind of tips that I use, I feel like there's still some very, very slight vacuum feeling of it. Not too much to the point where it has driver flex, but I feel like there's that suction thing that just, I can't really get over it. After I wore it, after I start playing songs, it's fine, but the moment that I stop, I always feel like there's this very weird vacuum feeling, in my ears. But that is just my gripe about it. In terms of longevity for listening to this, I can listen to it for almost 2 hours without any problems whatsoever. Which comes to a very quick segue to sound quality. And also, I just want to say, if this video feels like it's a little bit rushed, maybe it is, because I don't want to be that guy who nags 20 minutes just to get my points through, and hopefully you guys get to have the same amount of stuff that I'm trying to deliver as of my previous videos, but you know, in a more compact way. So, going back to the sound quality. In general, after listening to this for, I guess, on and off about 6 to 7 hours, and by the way, this is the source that I use, and this is the graph. The TSMR X in general is a very, I would say, warm V-shaped IEM with quite the emphasis on the bass. Now, before we actually talk about how does everything else sound, I just want to have a few comments on, you know, the features that this thing has. Let's talk about the dip switches first. I personally have really not I personally have really not tried to look into what do the dip switches do. Rather, I just want to, you know, explore myself. And in my personal opinion, the 1, 2, and 3 basically translates to mid bass, lower bass, and sub bass. If you turn everything off, it's just gonna be sounding like an elevator music. Like, really, there's gonna be literally zero bass whatsoever. So no matter what you do, you definitely need to have one of those switches on. And I don't know why I personally just don't like the 020 config. It feels so. I just switched on number 3 and call it a day. But in a very simple manner to explain things, 1 is for mid bass, 2 is for lower bass, and 3 is for sub bass. But the good thing about this is that I would want to say it cuts off at a very perfect spot. So if you only want sub bass, just turn 1 on. If you want sub and lower, which I personally don't recommend, it sounds a little bit concussive, turn on 3 and 2. And if you just want mid bass, just turn on 1. That's it. And it translates to the same thing as tips, like I mentioned just now. I tried using their stock tips. It's fine, but I feel like it's a little bit too bloaty. And after trying on multiple types of tips, I feel like the Tangzhou Sancai is still, like, you know, one of the better tips for me to listen to. At least it retains the vocals rather than making it sound more thin, more hollow when I'm using something else that has a thin profile, something like the spring tips. This thing, I would say, is quite a good pair for tip roll. If you really want those minute tweaks, you could probably buy multiple types of tips and try it out on this pair. And also, it is also very quite cable sensitive if you want to cable roll as well. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just talk about how this thing is being reviewed in its most stock form. Anyway, starting off with the bass. Now, like I said, the sub bass is very, very distinctive and very strong, but personally I feel like it's a little bit too much for me once, you know, I had too much of a long listen. But definitely the first few tracks were still very, very incredible, but I had to really take note of what tracks I'm listening to, what albums I actually playing through. Otherwise it might actually be a little bit too overwhelming. But definitely once I feel like I've hit that plateau, I feel I've hit that fatigue, I switch to the Sancai tips rather than the stock tips just to feel a little bit better. And definitely the bass definition also has some slight improvement once you tip roll. Me personally, again, once I've switched to the Sancai, it sounds a little bit more better, but I would say it's still not something that is very resolving, something along the lines of, like, you know, the Alpha Omega Ra. That thing is still, in my opinion, one of the better bassy pairs in 2024, which, let me just segue a little bit. I mentioned that this thing is a very good precedent for talking about 2024, which basically, I just want to say, a lot of pairs that I've listened to, and from what I've heard, many people now focus a lot on the bass. So this thing, in my opinion, is quite a very good pair for bass. But in terms of resolution, it really reflects on the pricing. This thing costs $399 as of now. The bass, in my opinion, is very fun. The bass, in my opinion, is very modulative. If you want more mid bass, you want more lower bass, you could do whatever you want with it. It is that versatile in the bass region. But definitely lower bass, I don't want to comment on it because I don't really like it for some reason. But the mid bass is quite strong as well. It is quite emphasizing as well. Kicks, in my opinion, is stumpy, but not really that much of an airy type of feel. Bass notes definitely, again, are very full, but might be a little bit bloaty for some people. Me personally, I can get it why my friends say that it's a little bit bloaty, but, you know, to each their own. Me personally, I feel like it's still a very fun pair to enjoy, but definitely not more than 30 minutes in my opinion. If I want more than 30 minutes, I'll just tip roll. So moving on to the mids. How does the mid sound? Now, overall, like I said, this pair is quite a warm V-shape IEM, and it definitely translates to the mids as well. The vocals, in my opinion, does not really sound that resolving. Like, there's no sparkliness at the end of all the stuff. Or, you know, I would say it doesn't have enough emotion. Female vocals in general sound a little bit warm and definitely has some decent overtones to it. But for male vocals, I like the fact that it doesn't really have that much color compared to female vocals, and in my opinion, I don't know why, but it just sounds more transparent. I could listen more to the mastering of the song in general. Instruments on this pair sound warm. It sounds a little bit of an analog feel, but instead of like tube amps, I don't know why I associate this more to like a cassette tape player type of warmness, that type of analogness to it. Pianos sound very nice, but would be a little bit one-dimensional in terms of its dynamics due to the fact that it's not really much of a detail pair. And guitars definitely are the same as well. You could feel like it's quite enjoyable. You could feel that the warmness really gives it a very, very inviting coloration of the whole track. But still, if you're one of those people like me who really enjoys details, this is probably not the one for you. But I will say this, it is very nice. It is very, very enjoyable. It is of a palate cleanser that I did not expect to find. And definitely having any vocal ensembles really shine here with just the right amount of immersion, in my opinion. Moving on to the treble and the upper mids, how does this whole thing sound? In my opinion, I feel like the placement and the amplitude of everything in the treble region would be just right. Again, due to the warmness, it is not fatiguing to listen to, it is just right. But definitely, when we're talking about warm IEMs, it definitely loses out on the sparkliness, it loses out on the brightness, the crispiness of the hi-hats, the cymbals, the rides, any guitar shreds. But still, the tonality of the hi-hats and cymbals, all those things in my opinion still sound quite good, but it lacks some aggression to it, if it makes sense. Think of something like a general V-shape IEM and the triple with melee. I like to use the triple with melee a lot as, you know, a reference point. Something in between, like it gets aggressive, but it's not that immersive, if it makes any sense. But still, I would say that if you want the best analogy that I could give you, it is something along the lines of like listening to 90s hip-hops where you listen to the boom bap percussions. Like the snares, in my opinion, resolve just at the right amount to the point where I could say, wow, this sounds like boom bap. Guitar shreds, again, like I say, it sounds alright, but for very, very aggressive parts like guitar solos, I would actually want that slight fatigueness when I'm listening to it. Like, you know, when you're pumped up through the music and that is like the climax of this whole track, it doesn't really hit that much. So take that as you will. So with all that said, let's move on to the technicalities. First of all, dynamics, in my opinion, sound just alright. When you crank up the volume, everything just scales quite neatly. Nothing sounds askew, the bass does not overwhelm too much, so on and so forth. But in terms of the soundstage, this thing is honestly quite narrow, quite claustrophobic in my opinion. Despite the fact that this thing costs $400 US, it sounds like a Kato equivalent for me in terms of the soundstage. Like, even when I say that, the Kato still sounds a little bit more airy. It sounds a little bit more relaxing, this thing, due to the fact that it has a little bit too much bass. And again, I'm not a bass head. Please keep this in mind. Due to the fact that it has a little bit too much bass, in my opinion, it might sound a little bit cramped when you're listening to anything that has more on the low end. But despite what I said, imaging is still quite on par with almost everything else in this price point. You could definitely have very good pinpoint of what track is at which position. But again, if this thing is a little bit more wider, maybe it might sound even more better, even more immersive. And last but not least, in terms of detail retrieval, like I said, this is not a detail focused pair. This is more of a fun pair to listen and to relax to. Like, let me just give you guys a few examples of what I would say used to relax. Something along the lines of FKJ, something along the lines of Senfa, something along the lines of this right here, Ryuichi Sakamoto. Y'all should probably listen to that. That thing is very, very immersive, even better on vinyl, basically. But my point is, at the end of the day, if you like bass and you want a little bit of a modularity, trying to figure out what you personally want, but it's still within the low end, you could probably consider this pair. And if you really don't mind having a little bit less details, which surprisingly, a lot of people do not like the M15 due to this, and again, I'm still driving an M15, you could get this pair. This pair, in my opinion, is quite warm, quite fun, quite relaxing to listen to. But with all that being said, hopefully this video is not that claustrophobic to listen to. My videos will be more and more compact. I'm trying my best to make everything shorter as possible, and I have nothing else to say. Oh yeah, maybe one more thing. I have a brand now, NOTBRAND Acoustics. I will probably make a video on our stuff in a while. I'm basically just going to talk about the philosophy of this thing right here. This is a personal pair for one of our friends or clients, Oki. Y'all probably know. He's a reviewer in Singapore and basically reviews in English and also Cantonese sometimes. So, you know, support him because he supports us. Why do I sound like Crit? Anyways, I'm just gonna wrap this up. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys whenever the next video comes. Peace.